This episode of the Pocketnow Weekly is brought to you by Ops Genie. Things can go wrong with your business, and they will, so it matters how quickly you can get things fixed up. Thanks to Ops Genie, you can get your operations and developer teams on the problem fast with the right scheduling tools and escalation paths. With Ops Genie, your next incident doesn't stand a chance. Visit opsgenie.com to sign up for a free company account for up to 5 team members. No credit card required. That's opsgenie.com. Never miss an alert again with Ops Genie from Atlassian. And hello and welcome to episode 331 of the weekly, brought to you by Pocketnow and XA developers, recorded on Friday, the 9th of November, 2018. Reaching peak Apple to the departure of the Nexus. We've got plenty to unfold this week, so let's get right to it. Josh and the crew are on assignment this week, so I'm here. I'm Jules Wong. I'm glad to have an old friend back on. It's TK Bay. Good Friday to you.
Good Friday to you too, my friend. Nice to see you again. And yeah, I love hanging out with you. Nice Friday afternoon, sunny, windy where I am, but it's nice. It's nice to see your face again.
Trying to avoid the fires up in Ventura County, so
Yeah,
I'm very
yeah.
grateful that that has
A
affected
lot
you
of a
yet.
lot of smoke right now. No, luckily, no, we're about 30 minutes or so away from them, but we can definitely see the plume, the smoke, and the air. The quality of the air does get affected. So they pretty much recommend us staying home today. But yeah, which I'm
Yeah,
doing,
yeah,
which is good.
we're doing well, doing fine at least. Keep a thought out for those people up there. And joining us for the first time to spin her gears is GeekSpin's own Helena Stone. This has been overdue, Helena. Come on, welcome in.
It has been. I mean, what took so long? Come on.
I don't know. I don't know what happened. I'm glad that we're able to have you on this week and for further weeks as we go on. I hope to have you on our big CES show because we're all going to be there.
Oh, you better.
We're just going to have like a room full of people and then just one camera, and we're just going to pack you in, and it's just going to be great.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
definitely.
actually not going to be great because we know what happens at CES. We're going to get sick, just like a couple of us are right now, and
Mhm.
then we're going to have to like work through it and try and get as many 60-second hands-on videos done with our voices all kind of and you're trying your best, and you have to keep recording 3 times over because you flubbed this line or that line. It's great.
Nothing like the nerd flu.
Nope.
Theraflu, Robitussin, my drinks of choice over there. Yeah. In any case, we have lots to get through. We do want to get your feedback on it, you listener or you viewer, in any case. So be sure to tweet at us, #PN Weekly, so that we are able to track down what you're saying in real time as I try and reach for my phone. That could be on this side or could be on my right side. It could be here. Yes, that's right. All right. I'll keep track of that as we go along and talk about our first story here. So, what is the measure of success for Apple at this point? Because we are going into a holiday season where Apple has decided that it will no longer give out unit sales numbers in its quarterly earnings. And this is on top of a kind of mediocre forecast for revenues, where the street has been expecting, 93 billion, some numbers that we can't even comprehend because we're just mere mortals. And then Apple's like, well, we're aiming for like 91 billion ish. So, what does the picture look like going forward? What does it mean more sales in a market where iPhones have saturated the US and maybe have reached as far as they're going to go in most of the developed markets? Or is the price game going to be next? What's next, Helena?
Well, I think in general, this strategy was really smart on Apple's part. They know that it's most likely impossible for them to beat their previous numbers, right? And if they don't show growth, right, they don't show growth in numbers, that looks bad when all these other Chinese players are beating them. But ultimately, I don't think that it's a bad sign for the company because they're still making lots of money, right? And they seem to be compensating by making their handsets more expensive. They're compensating in so many different ways. But I get why they don't want to release those numbers. It makes absolute sense. Um,
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't really. I mean, the market has kind of started to react a little bit to this whole. All right, we're seeing 4 digits now, and I'm a little bit scared. I'm not looking forward to paying $40 a month on my cellular bill. In addition to the cellular service that I'm going to have, um, I think we're
I,
getting there.
I wouldn't be surprised if they end up beating those numbers, that they end up releasing their numbers. So I feel like this is like a safe way for them to play it. Hey, we're not going to release the numbers, and if somehow they beat the numbers, I bet they'll share that.
Perhaps,
It's,
Yeah,
perhaps,
it's a
and
yeah,
smart
they could still
strategy.
say they beat last year's number. They just don't have to be specific. Yeah, no, exactly.
yeah,
It,
and well, considering that Samsung and Huawei, which are still kind of building their reputations on those numbers, world's most popular smartphone brand by shipments, like that kind of thing. I'm wondering what the picture is for you, TK.
for me, Apple has been. I mean, they're in the media for other things as well. I mean, we'll get a chance to talk a little bit more about them in that aspect. But as far as the numbers, like Elena said, I think realistically, not having to share the numbers just gives them the ability to just not have to worry about having to answer those questions every time the quarterly reports come out. But the short answer is they're going to still be measured by how many shipments, how many stores are sold out, how much the wait times, and people will still talk about them. And I think that will help their stock kind of survive in the long run. In the near term, this is just like a minimal dip. Most people are reacting to the, well, why don't you want to share? And then something will take over. But the reality at the end of the day, when we look at the actual product sales and the innovation, well, not innovation, but numbers, new laptops, the mini, the new Air, the new iPhones, all of those things, taking the price out of it, I think makes them just trying to, feed into that high life, ticket. People are buying into the brand, no longer worrying about the number. And that I think that's really what it is. And hopefully that could translate into more sales for them and just not having to worry about competing with themselves now, since they're so far ahead to some other people, they don't have to actually compete.
So we're going to the world of theory here. What if they decide to reinstate those reports? Perhaps just because of a turning point, like maybe it's this iPhone 10 SSRAPGS is
That's next year's
um,
model, by the way. You just give out a name. That's not good, man. That's not good.
no, no, I'm very sorry.
Yeah.
What if that has like for some reason done 20% better than ever or something like that? Like, do you think it's a move that Apple will kind of rue or what?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it will be like the first slide they put up when they on the next keynote for the next iPhone. They'll boost the numbers. They'll refer to percentages. I think it's just not having to give out the specifics. I think that's really what they're shooting for. They just want to be able to just say, look, we are doing good. We're still producing the same amount of new devices. We're selling them. I think they just want to take out the question of numbers just from the reporting. It doesn't mean that you still can't see how they're performing, and it's in the long run better for them not to have to say you know this is how much we made on the iPhone 10 and this is how much we made on the iPhone 10s. It's just a numbering thing, right? Because at the end of the day, people are still buying the iPhone 10s, XR slash dash, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And Helena, what do you think about U-turn if there is any down the road?
What was that? I didn't hear that.
Oh,
Sorry.
what do you think about U-turn if there are any U-turns to be had down the road in terms of reporting out these numbers?
Oh yeah, I mean, I said it before. I wouldn't be surprised that if they do beat the numbers, that they'll
Mhm.
go ahead and share those numbers. I feel like that's very Apple-like of them in general.
Just like a little line, little quote in the press release or something like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see about that. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how Apple judges itself, and in reflection, how we investors and customers judge Apple as we move forward here. But in the meantime, we have plenty to talk about related to Apple, sort of related to Apple. And this is talking about Qualcomm too, which it continues on. The legal sparring continues on. It all started with Qualcomm being accused of very anti-competitive behavior in terms of working its OEM clients to not use any other chipsets from their competitors. And it's blown up to this massive war between Apple and Qualcomm. And for the longest time, we've heard Qualcomm give all these platitudes and saying that Apple is still a valued customer, still a valued partner, and we look forward to continuing this relationship with them. And between all the sales injunction requests for iPhones and other things that perhaps we haven't seen yet, Apple, a source to Reuters from the Apple side, has said that they are not negotiating with Qualcomm at any level. Quote, there is absolutely no meaningful discussion between us and Qualcomm, and there is no settlement in sight. And when you think about how much of an impact, how much presence Qualcomm has in our industry, and what, two titans, Apple being one of the most profitable companies in the world, and being able to perhaps ask for damages that might be worth more than Qualcomm is as a company. What do you think about this stalemate at this point, TK? What do you think about what happens here? Does Apple have more of a chance of winning than Qualcomm, or what?
I think the seriousness of the way Apple is playing it right now is it's very big. Like, I'm the big kahuna in the room right now, and you need to pay attention to me. And they do obviously command a very large presence in the market. Qualcomm can't really just shun them and say, well, we're not going to talk to you guys. But again, if we keep in mind historically, performances as far as radio performance on on iPhones and such devices have never been at the same level as some of the other devices that we've seen on the market. I think this is pretty much just, for the better for worse, I think this is just a negotiation ploy. They need to basically trying to make their presence found, and Qualcomm come to the table as the understanding of you're working with the big guys, and you really need to give us what we need. Because at the end of the day, of course, Apple also has historically done this, where they've gone with their own chipset. I mean, they have their own main chipset in the SoC, so relying on Qualcomm could potentially not be an issue for them if they decide to venture into, jumping into that, if they do want to do that. I think it's really something that Qualcomm needs to pay attention for it, and should not, they shouldn't basically go in there thinking, well, they need to answer to us. I think it's the other way around. Apple has a really good presence here.
Well, in terms of making their own components, I think it's kind of interesting to think about how one of Qualcomm's accusations against Apple is that it helped Intel, one of the competing chip, the modem makers, with copying some of Qualcomm's proprietary code and helping them out in that aspect. So that's interesting. Helena, what's your take on this whole conflict?
Well, I definitely can't follow who's wrong or who's right in all of this. It's super confusing. But I get why Apple's kind of being very steadfast. They don't need Qualcomm right now. They're making great chips. So they certainly don't need them. And they certainly have the lawyer power to keep fighting Qualcomm off. So if I were them, I'd just keep doing what they're doing and saying no settlement, none of that.
Yeah, it is kind of, we're left in a position here because a lot of us in the Pocketnow community are more inclined towards Android, and Qualcomm has a great relationship with those Android OEMs.
Oh, yeah.
So whatever happens here might have ripple effects down the road, and who knows whether or not it will have a net benefit or net drag on whatever progress gets done over on that side. So I know this is kind of a tough, tangly issue that we want to get into, but at least in terms of that, it's worth it to be aware of things as we go along here.
Oh, no, definitely. I mean, when we look at Android and iOS, we have to keep in mind, obviously, Qualcomm is a big player. I mean, Huawei and the Kirin chipset, we haven't really seen that much presence on their end. So pretty much, if Qualcomm gets a big hit, Android as an ecosystem gets a hit. So it's a big issue, but I don't think it's beneficial to either one of the companies to basically destroy the other. I think realistically, this is a negotiation point of reference. I think Qualcomm realistically either A, fesses up to it, but I mean, we've seen them have long battles, like Helena said. They have the lawyer power to stretch things for years. I mean, we all remember Samsung and Apple, and that took forever.
How
So
did that end? I can't remember.
it was a
I
settlement
think
from
it's
what I
still.
remember. Oh, they're still going.
No, I think it did end. Like, it was tossed back down as like the article, it was something about an article of manufacture, what could be considered that, and whether or not the Samsung would owe this much, a little bit, or this much a lot.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
like
Yeah,
that's
but that was
Samsung
stretched
lost is
for
just how badly. That was
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
7 years. So
Yeah, I mean,
Oh.
who
so
knows what we'll be in for this one.
well, the good thing
All
is that
right.
Qualcomm is also venturing into other.
Yeah.
There's mobile wearables, always connected PCs. So we're starting to see the Qualcomm chipset in more markets than just mobile smartphones like we've seen them in the past.
It needs to stay relevant. It needs to stay relevant in the 5G era that many have argued it has pioneered, and
Hmm.
a lot of catch up, especially with the new standard. Intel and MediaTek are kind of one of the backups that Apple is considering for that 2020 iPhone. So we'll have to see where that goes and how the rest of the market plays itself out. Let's go to the rest of the market for a little bit, shall we? Let's talk about LG. I
Oh
know
man,
this was
yeah.
announced at IFA. Um, why does it exist? So we have the LG G7 Fit, um, which I have called 2018 Snapdragon 821 phone. And it was just announced for wide availability in most of the world. I'm not sure about North America, but the rest of the world will get it. And I'm wondering what's going on here, because back in 2017, the LG G6 launched with a Snapdragon 821, and that was
Mhm.
already kind of
A year behind.
6 months out of its realm. And I don't know like what the deal was between Qualcomm and LG. How many? Because like I think there were several more models that had the 821 in it from LG. Like how many parts did Qualcomm give to LG in order for this to like have happened? Because this is kind of weird. This is kind of insane. So it has a lot of the LG G7 ThinQ specs. You're talking about the 6.1-inch display that's super bright and whatnot.
Mhm.
3,000 milliamp hour battery is kind of okay. Single cameras on the back and front, which all right, fine. But
It reminds me of
yeah,
the LG G7 One Edition. So yeah,
yeah.
Hmm.
Didn't that go with this one of the 600s?
yeah, that was a little bit less powered, but what they did is a similar form factor where they took some stuff from the G7 and they kind of brought it down a little bit. And I think it's mostly maybe just a pricing kind of an approach to how to sell this phone.
I don't know. Well, what do you think about this whole thing, Helena, at the moment?
Well, I have two separate thoughts. One is the name is horrible, because when I hear it, I think it's going to be like a wearable that matches up with the LG G7. So there's just like confusion right away there for me. And there's
No,
got
this
to
is
be
this is LG's foldable phone, and you can wrap it around your wrist, and it becomes your health
that
band.
feels like it would be a great name for it. But the other part, like to me, it seems like they're trying to come out with another one answer to the OnePlus, and they don't really have it yet. But this is like the kind of their but it is similar to the LG G7 One Edition. It's just like, hey, we have another more affordable handset, or maybe this is their answer to the iPhone XR, because the
Hmm.
V40 ThinQ is
Just on a
pretty
pure
expensive.
price competition point,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's what it
Yeah.
seems like to me, especially if it doesn't come out in North America. In those other markets where there's high demand for more affordable devices, it makes sense for them. Will it be
No,
successful? I have no idea.
well, yeah, no, exactly.
It's
It's
one of
a
those. Mhm.
no, no. Go ahead.
Go ahead, TK.
No, I was gonna to echo Elena's point of reference. If you, yeah, when you start looking at the specifications of what they have, they've given it enough kind of unique features, but not enough for it to compete with the U.S. market. So it doesn't really make sense for us to get it as competition to the G7 ThinQ. But other markets that would have wanted an IP68 phone, this is not a bad deal. I mean, it's water resistant. It does come out with Oreo, which is a little bit interesting. But again, they probably will at some point next year push it up, and it still has a pretty good display. It's not that bad actually. It's a good contender. The 821 is still a powerful, SoC. It's a few years behind, quite a few
I
years.
mean, I would be kind of concerned about it going into the end of its support life from Qualcomm. I'm not sure how long these chips are patched for on their end, and I'm not sure if it matters that much anyway, since LG wouldn't be inclined as much to patch up their older phones, or one of their minor
Yeah.
phones, you could say, for that long. I'm not sure where the guarantee kicks in, because Android recently introduced a requirement. I think it was with Pi though. It was with Pi,
Pi.
and this is with Oreo that you had that all Android phones must be a 2-year track for software updates. But yeah, you have any more thoughts, Helena?
No, I was gonna say maybe they had like a whole load of 821s lying around that they
That's what I
needed
was
to
gonna
use.
say. Yeah.
No, that's what they did. Like it's like they had like all of the 821s. It was like late in what was it, 2016, and by that time, a lot of OEMs had passed them over, and it was like, well, what are we going to do with all these 821s? Ship in the bin and toss it over to LG, and that's it. And like I would hate to think that those chipsets have been lying around for like a year and a half in some dusty bin before it was like, okay, let's bring them out for
Let's make a new phone out of them.
let's make a new
You know,
phone.
it still could do pretty well. It depends on the market that it's going to go into. Like I said, it's still a powerful CPU. We're looking at, I mean, the reality is, if we're looking at LG's performance, the update cycle of the procedure that they go through with their updates, we're probably not going to get that many updates on this phone anyways. So for the most part, it really will serve the life cycle of what their general, update cycle that we get for their phones. So depends on the market, and if the price is right, it's still better than having a 600 600 level chipset. The 821 is pretty powerful.
I don't know. I'm just kind of
uh,
that value proposition doesn't work in my head. I'm sorry. It just
no,
ugh.
no, we're the wrong demographic. Just keep that in
I
mind.
know,
We're
I know, I know, I
That's the
know. It's
thing.
just, but it's like, come on, come on. You could like take the 630, take the 636 or whatever. Come on, you
Yeah, I
just
know.
trade them in, recycle the materials, please. All right. Since my blood pressure is already at a little bit higher than it should be, let's talk about the Asus Zenfone 6,
Yeah.
which I will put on screen right now. So listeners, I'm sorry, you can go to pocketnow.com/podcast and click on the latest episode for the rundown, and you'll be able to see the pleasure that is this. This is apparently a leak from hdblog.italy, or IT, because that's the 2-letter code for the country. In any case, this is supposedly the Asus Zenfone 6. It's got a little tiny speaker. It's got minimal bezels. That's all right. And then there's nothing else wrong here, right?
No,
Does anyone want to just spill the guts, spill the beans on this?
I kind of like it. It doesn't bother me. I actually think this is where all these notches started with, pushing it to the right side, the top right of the display. I think it's fine. I think it's kind of like efficient. It kind of reminds me of like when the X part of your window on a desktop, like it's kind of there in the
Yeah.
corner. You don't really think about it till you need it. I like it.
I don't
I'm
know.
interested
I
to
would
see how
feel
the
more a little
UI,
bit more.
yeah, how Android works
Yeah,
with the
yeah. Go ahead.
notifications on that. Because so yes, I'm with you. I think it's very minimal. I think the teardrop effect, I think, is going to be, we're going to see a lot of that. I mean, we already see it with a lot of the new devices, even with Huawei with their 20X. Teardrop is the next thing. OnePlus did that as well. Offsetting it though, I
I feel less okay with it because it's next to the for the most stupid reason. It's
it,
next to the it's like cramping the battery information, where I guess I would have actually felt more okay with it if it were next to the time, if we separated the time, because most of the time when you're looking up at your smartphone for a second, it's like, oh, check the time, and perhaps if this were like an AMOLED display like that'd be great, because you're laying up so few pixels and be right there in a delineated kind of way. And I would have liked that, but instead it's on the right side next to the battery information, and then I, I don't know.
I
I
think
think
it's
they
just
just need. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, for me, it's more of a symmetry thing. It's just purely, that's what it is. I don't have a problem with the fact that it's a teardrop effect. It's just the symmetry of where it's positioned. For me, I think the center portion would make sense, as most notifications kind of pop up from the right and from the left on the device. And having it offset either to the right, it just kind of throws off for me the look. And it looks like they're not allowing it to. I mean, we have to still see how they treat the UI with it. Android's more configured to run with a notch in the center with all of their configurations. So did they change that, or how are they routing all the notifications in the notification panel on this?
Yeah, Helena, another
Sorry.
thought?
Yeah, no, I agree with what TK said. I think it comes down to the UI, and this probably isn't the final look, right? So if they can just tweak it to make it look more finessed, I don't think it'll bother us as much.
So I've
Yeah.
had literally zero 0.4 femtoseconds to think about the other side of this. And if you're in a language with left to right, you could actually pull off a notification decently just by having it the standard length instead of having to adjust for the notch, because that's mostly where your text is going to be on the top level, and then the bottom level, you would have a full line of text that you could insert if you needed it. So I don't know. I mean, there is some thought to it. Maybe if if we went to Arab speaking countries or right to left languages, then perhaps this would feel much more wrong. But who knows? I don't know.
I think they're
It is
trying to make
interesting
it
to look
unique
at.
as it is, and I'm all for smaller bezels and trying to figure out creative ways to put the camera module in there. I mean, the reality is we're starting to see full display phones, right? We're starting to see these things with mechanism. Um, I don't know the best way to describe it would be basically hiding it behind the entire display,
Oh,
leaving
you're showing off that what was it?
this is the Magic 2, not the Mi
The
Mix.
Magic 2. Oh, okay.
The other guy that came out of the market at the same time with the
Which I
triple.
think is more, I think that solution's more ridiculous. Just saying.
I know, I
That's
know. But so the kid part of me loves playing with this all day. I know I'm gonna break it, but the reality is, I think it all comes down to the UI and the experience. Placing it in the middle or on the right or the left. As long as you make the rest of the UI cohesive and it looks right, and when you're playing movies and stuff, it doesn't just sit there and kind of looks odd for you. I think realistically, they don't. Nobody really should worry about it. But what they're doing right now is they're the first people to do it. If this is true, and I think it'll catch a lot of press for that. I think that's pretty much what they're trying to go for. It's a nice
TK,
placement.
do me a favor and just click that a few times right next to your microphone. No, the phone.
Oh,
Do the
sorry, one
click.
more time. Yeah.
Do it. Yeah. So we'll be going into Pocketnow ASMR in the near future.
Yeah.
That was just a little preview of what you can look forward to. So in the meantime, we'll be moving on and saying
We do
goodbye
have a
to
video
a
on that
couple.
also on the hands-on
Oh
video
yeah, on
for the Magic 2 that's on
Pocketnow on YouTube.
yep on
Please
Pocketnow. You guys
look
should
at
check
that.
that out.
Lots of hands-on coverage that we've been able to pull off with TK joining our video crew every once in a while. So much
Yeah.
appreciated in that effort. In the meantime, we shall say goodbye to a couple of old friends here. The Nexuses have received their last updates, their last guaranteed updates at the very least. They've reached the
Yeah.
point where it's been 18 months since they've left the Google Store. And now the Nexus 5X, made by LG, and the Nexus 6P from Huawei are now officially out of service. It's a sad day for a lot of people who kind of cherished the last bastions of what it meant for Google to have its name behind a phone, where it maybe targeted towards developers, or was it just maybe turning the corner around towards that consumer appeal? Because obviously the next year after, we had the Pixel phones. That's all made by Google and was like all these consumer friendly features. Any eulogies? That's the word I'm trying to think of. Eulogies from you. I'll start with Helena on this one.
well, they were great phones. Right now, I'm imagining them on an island with Clippy, just kind
Oh,
of lounging
Yeah,
around.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, they really were iconic Android handsets, and I think that a lot of people hung on to them for a long time. But what's kind of sad is that they're not that old, but yet they feel so old because so much has changed in a few years. It's kind of crazy to think how far we've come in just since what 2015.
I think
So
we've grown older than the phones have, to be honest. It's been crazy. TK, from you?
So I will basically spill the proverbial drink for our fallen heroes, and but I will always be so. As you know, obviously with XDA, everything never really dies. Really, it's more of a reincarnation. So one of the best benefits of having Nexus devices, and one of the main reasons why a lot of developers fell in love with them, and even enthusiasts, was the fact that they were easily unlockable, easily test beds for many, many different versions of software. And I think if there's anything to learn from this is that, yes, official support has gone down, obviously, as we're reaching that timeline. But your devices would hopefully live on, and XDA definitely has a big community that love their Nexus and Nexi devices, myself included. I don't have the 6P, I have the 6 and the 5X. So for me, definitely they'll live on. And I love the designs. I always really wish that the Nexus line carried, but I do appreciate what the Pixel line is bringing into the table.
That was a beautiful eulogy. Very well done.
Very well done. And I guess my foray into this was with the Nexus 5. I got on with the last little bit of it, the last little tail end of that train, Nexus 5X, which introduced me to Project Fi, actually. So,
Yeah.
and I've been enjoying it ever since. So thank you, Google, for that, I guess. And also just thank you for having the developer in mind in terms of both software and hardware for the time that has been. Right now, I don't know that's happening. I think I've heard about a Pixel 3 that's not being fixed. So, too bad for that. I think it was the one that was that got shipped to the customer all smashed up, and
no.
they say, I believe, that's something for the Reddits that you can look at.
Exactly.
Unfortunately. In the meantime, we'll be transitioning over to Samsung in just a couple of minutes, but not before we take our first break. We'll be right back. The Pocketnow Weekly is brought to you by the National Security Agency. Almost every day, we hear something on the news about a cyber attack. Sometimes it's just a bunch of pranksters, but more often it's a foreign country with vast cyber resources trying to hack our power grid, our banking systems, or our military's information networks. The National Security Agency plays a big part in protecting our country from cyber attacks, and you can help. The NSA is hiring technical professionals to serve on the front lines of information security. If you work in computer science, networking, programming, or electrical engineering, you can help keep our country safe. Design new hardware systems and networks. Write faster, smarter programs. Protect America's critical infrastructure. Or help uncover what our adversaries are planning to do next. Learn more about careers at the National Security Agency today. Visit intelligencecareers.gov/NSA. That's intelligencecareers.gov/NSA. The Pocketnow Weekly is also supported by OnePlus. If you want one of the fastest phones this year, look no further than the OnePlus 6T. With a huge 8 gigabytes of RAM, it keeps more of the apps you use in cache, so they open almost instantly. You can buy 6T now for just half the price of the other flagship phones from this year. Check out pocketnow.com/OnePlus6T for more information. Whew. All right, let me recover a little bit with a little drink, and then I'll get back to you. All right, and we are back, and here to just unwind a little bit, because I do want to continue one of Joshua's favorite habits and check in with both of you on how your week's been doing. I'll say that my week has been going just swimmingly. I've been exploring in New England while I've been working online. So I found one of my favorite sandwich places now. It's right down near the border of Massachusetts and Rhode Island, called the Beef Barn. It's very cute, and I love their roast beef sandwiches. It's great. TK, what do you think? What's been your week?
My week it's been an interesting week, up and down. I've been a lot of good news coming out of, as far as mobile tech, and just overall, I would have to say knee deep in Huawei and Honor land for the most part this week for me. um, a lot of new tech, a lot of new phones, new form factors. So keeping myself busy, and probably doing another live stream coming after this for an unboxing of the new Palm phone.
Oh,
New
hey.
little,
Hey,
tiny
look at
phone,
that.
totally opposite of what I
That
normally use it for.
$350 add-on from Verizon that you have to have a line for. And it's,
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it's
know,
great as it's on its own.
It's cute. I want to check it out. I want to see how it works. Does it really make sense to have a secondary phone as a? I don't know. The concept is a little bit confusing for me. I have a watch, but apparently I need a phone.
Perhaps. TK, what's your YouTube channel, by the way, just so we tell
Easy
y'all.
enough. YouTube.com/TKBay, TKBAY. Just
Great,
type in
great.
TKBay XDA or TKXDA. That comes up.
Yeah, yeah. So you can keep track of that and make sure that you tune in for that unboxing of the Palm phone. Helena, I want to ask you how your week has been.
It has been pretty good. What's been nice about this week is that there hasn't been any really big, like constant launches every day or 5 a day. But I've actually started to be able to play with this product, which finally got to unbox, even though it's been
Oh,
sitting.
that's the new Lenovo Yoga.
YogaBook C930. Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
remember
See,
that one
I
too.
can't get
That was
behind the whole letters and numbers thing. It's just like it's the yoga book too. Come on.
no, but
I
that
agree
one
with
is
you on that
very
one.
nice. Yeah, no, definitely. I can.
It is. It's much improved over the first generation. They're using an e-ink display instead of that like
Yeah.
laser etched keyboard. It's much better for typing. There's a better processor now, a much better display. Overall, much nicer. It still needs there's still room for improvement, but it's actually quite an enjoyable.
None of that paper on pen thing going on anymore. That's a welcome sight to see. So I look forward to reading more about that on geekspin.co.co. That's a little plug for you right there. Boom.
Yeah,
All
no,
right.
I'm looking forward to that one too. I was excited when I got a chance to see that with Jaime at IFA, and yeah, that is it just yeah.
All the reviews live on the site since you plugged it. Just saying.
Uh, hey, there you go. There you go. Well, if I'm going to be dutiful in my whole plugging attitude, then beefbarn.com, I think. I'm not sure if that's the right address. I might have to look it up later. And
Hashtag
if
not a
that's
sponsor.
not the not a sponsor.
Not yet.
Hashtag not a sponsor. All right. Shall we take another crack at this and talk about things that should be unfolding in front of us? That's a question that you should say yes or no to.
I want an unfolding story. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to fill up time between
So many
loading up the
times, a
tabs.
little
A little story, little thing going on, I guess, is this week we saw the first prototype of, or at least the first public prototype of the Galaxy, what we've been thinking of as the Galaxy F. F stands for foldable, and this is it. This is the thing that we see here. It's very blocky, but that's because, and not just the picture quality, but just the actual phone. But that's because it is obscured for trade secret purposes, I guess. But what I really wanted to catch, and I, being the very weird person I am, I wanted to like get the screen capture tool up for the video, the live stream, because that's
Mhm.
where they were showing it off. And I've tried so hard like to get this exact frame um, like down, because like I was seeing it, it was like, well, you can show the phone that either in its flat mode or it has that exterior screen, but I wanted to make sure I wanted to get the folding, like the creasing going on in there, because that's the important thing that's being shown off here, is that creasing screen with the
Mhm.
Infinity Flex display. And they have a new UI to go with it. One UI they're talking about, which is introduces a new paradigm, and that's the action area. There's like an action area at the bottom of the screen because, of course, you can't really deal with all the controls. You can't just be pressing buttons all over the screen, because that's really not that convenient at all as screens go taller. And then you have I forget what the top half is called. I think it's like an action, not an action area, but like a viewing area for
Mhm.
some of the items that you want to see on top. You don't have to interact with them; you can just see it, and that's great.
Yeah.
So I look forward to that paradigm. We're talking about the display. It's a Super AMOLED display. I think it's like 1600p and a 3:2 aspect, I believe, on that unit.
It looked like more of a boxy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And there were also kind of suggestions of notches, potential notches and holes in the display so that you could fit in cameras, because that's something that you might want to consider, Samsung. So hey, something you want to think about. And then Android decided, hey, we have a developers conference too. Let's announce support officially for foldable displays. So there you go. I want to get your first impressions on what you were able to look at, Helena, in terms of like, did this meet your expectations of what you wanted to see from a foldable Samsung phone?
So no, it didn't. I mean, granted that what they showed off was, dark and they said it's a prototype, but I have lots of problems with this. Okay, number one, the bezels on that thing look gigantic. That freaks me out. Number two, it looks so thick. Like it looks thick and heavy, and I don't want that as a everyday phone. It's the yoga book I just showed off was thinner than that. That's not futuristic to me. And again, this was a prototype, so who knows what the final device will look like. But it makes me think of the ZTE Accent M, which was, was great concept, but at the end of the day, it wasn't something that you'd want to carry around every day because it was too thick and heavy. And it's almost like we're going backwards in time to foldable PDAs. And it just, to me, it doesn't work. What I really want, and what I thought we'd be seeing by now, is a flexible, rollable display. That's what I want. Where are those? Like, I felt like there was talk about it a couple of years ago, and now it's just, are we 10 years out from that? Like, that disappoints me so much. I won't jump into the other UI stuff that you touched on just yet, because I feel like you probably want to fit. TK probably has something to say about the foldable.
Yeah, and I also have some follow-on thoughts from your observations too, because I feel like there's a lot that might be going unsaid with this picture here. But TK, what are your first impressions?
I cannot agree more. Well, so I'm with you on as far as the design. Now, as far as the fold, I know a lot of people focused on when he was holding the phone and when he was folding it and the whole mechanism. Obviously, there is a case around that. But actually, in some of the materials when they were during the keynote, they show you basically that it actually never folds all the way. They showed you almost kind of like a teardrop look on it, where it kind of opened and there was an opening in the center, and that just tells me that this
Sort of like the Surface Book, right?
yeah, it has that little bit of an opening at the bottom, which tells me that this is not 100% foldable. Very early, like they're not sure how to actually, because it doesn't really fold, right? If it doesn't actually close, it's not really folding. And if the way I saw it, it looks like basically a device that will have a little bit of a thicker gap at the bottom end where the display kind of gets at the when it's curving. And like you said, Lena, it's probably going to have bezels all over the place. I think it's a more of a wow effect. I would prefer kind of like what we saw at IFA with the Nubia smartwatch. I don't know if you had a chance to check that out, but that
The
foldable
Alpha, right?
display that works on as a a smartwatch, more form factors like that, wearables. I think that works better for us as opposed to having a phone. It's just it's just yeah, we're going backwards. We're making thicker, wider phones, two-handed
Yeah,
phones.
that's kind of interesting that you point that out. I didn't actually notice that the first go around. In which case, I would have like I guess discounting that in terms of my original follow-on thoughts from Helena is that like there is that case. So we aren't sure what's going on here, but I would love to see the hinge on this and just think about how much of a exposure does that leave the screen in terms of any potential impacts, or like there's just a lot of things. And all right, so like
It's a tough one.
and I'm very frustrated about this because it's like, so why, if we're at this state and we're at this kind of crossroads, was this really the time to do it? Like, could this have waited another 6 months, another year, or is this coming to a point where it's do or die, and we are going to have to see this technology sink or float,
Hmm.
be written off as one of those fads, or perhaps change the way, or for the way that we use mobile phones. Like, I'm not sure about the timing of this.
This reminds me of like 3D televisions. Remember when it was like so hot and everybody was doing it, even though it was completely useless and it wasn't well implemented? This is like the same thing all over
This is
again.
one of those.
And we have to keep in mind that in reality, they never actually said that this is the phone that's coming out. This could be just a very high, really good prototype that they're able to show off the technology as far as the folding technology. And they may implement this as more of a wearable or maybe flexible display, not necessarily something. Because if you see that gap in the image and the fact that there is that big of a gap, nobody will ever put that phone in their pocket. I mean, can you imagine sitting on your pocket when your phone is sitting like there? I'm like, you can't. It just it's really I really it's a proof of concept. I hope, and I really hope that they use this technology to bring more better displays, flexible, showing us that they can do the flexible OLED with their new mechanism and the glue, the adhesive they talked about as far as how this is so new, so good. But again, what happened to that flexible display we saw a few years back, like Helena was talking about? We've seen this before. This
Yeah.
is not brand new. It just now looks like a phone, and yeah, yeah, I don't
I
know.
We
mean,
want better.
we do want better, and
We
we want
do.
it sooner, honestly. But I'm just kind of concerned about this, because consumer reactions will lay out how much more investment gets put into whatever this vertical might become, or
Yeah.
if it doesn't become anything at all. So, and I do want to see it come. I do want to see it arrive. But in terms of like the little things that we can't think about, like how durable it is, like for hundreds of thousands of folds, which many people think of as maybe lasting several years, at the very least 2 years, and perhaps even like creasing. Like, what does that do to the subpixels? Like, what happens there? So, because technically
I'm.
we're not in the point of foldables as much as bendables, and if
Mhm.
you were to fold it, well, like how well, what's the efficacy of it unfolding it and
Exactly.
dealing with
Yeah,
the crease and whatnot.
like you said, this is more of foldable, bendable, not foldable. It's the opposite way. I feel like it was more of a bending display, not necessarily
Yeah,
true foldable.
exactly. Don't call it foldable. There you
It's not
go.
as soon as we're able to like show like a little art piece on like an origami display with a swan, and like it'd be like the first major art piece that could rival things at like the Metropolitan Museum or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's quickly hit on One UI for a little bit and talk about, is this a much needed change in terms of what we've dealt with beforehand in terms of mobile UIs? Because again, those displays are getting taller and taller. So, TK, what's your thought?
I think it's a good movement in the sense of how the Touch UI or TouchWiz UI or even Samsung's UI has been going through its evolutions. It looks nicer. It's capitalizing on darker UI, saving battery. It's definitely I want to say it's the move in the right direction for them. I'm hoping the adoption that they're trying to bring in will carry over multiple generations of phones, because at least from the announcement that we saw, at least it looks great. It works great with long form factor devices, which they have for the last couple of years. And I think the reality of the matter is it's probably going to be something we need to get used to. It's different. And it's no longer them trying to be like others. They're trying to come up with their own design, which I really think is a good idea. I think it looks good, and I just hope that at least the last few generations of devices will get this UI, because their historic implementation of their new UIs generally don't carry back that far. So I'm hoping at least for this year and last year.
Yeah, this year's phones are going to have this updated. I think in January. It's remained to be seen for the S8 and Note 8, or was it Note? No, wait, the
Well, I
S8
think the
generation, I'll
S8
say.
and yeah, the S8 generation, there was a question on that, and then there's also the betas, as you meant, you probably may have heard it as well. They're pushing out some betas for some of their devices for this year's carrier, the S9 and the S9 Plus.
So it's a wait and see kind of thing going on.
I'm
We'll
waiting.
keep
As soon
track
as
of
that
that.
comes out, dude, I will put that on my phone just to get a chance to get that running.
Helena, your first impressions on One UI?
Hey, it looks really swanky. I'll tell you that. It looks clean and intuitive. It makes sense why they're doing it. I mean, Huawei with the Mate 20 Pro and EMUI 9, they made an emphasis about, they put an emphasis on the fact that it's designed for one-handed use.
Hmm.
So that seems to be the direction that all these companies need to go in, because phones are getting bigger and longer, right? So you got
Yeah.
to adapt to that.
I
I
feel
mean,
like it's
Huawei's not making it any easier with a 7.2-inch display. So
ugh, yuck.
the
That
20X is massive.
that is scary. That is
Yeah.
weird. And yeah, so I guess there's that. And finally, is it time for a pink and a green phone? I think that's, well, they've already hasn't haven't phones been going out in like green and pink and blue for
I
a
think
while now? Because I
green
remember there was a
stuff. I
green
haven't.
phone.
There was.
There was wasn't there a Galaxy? Is it S8 or S7 that there was a green version, but it didn't come to the
There was like an
US?
emerald. Yeah, there was like an emerald green. Yeah, yeah,
Oh
you're
man.
right. And then there was what pink is kind of like more often these days because it's always been masked in like orchid or violet or whatever. But like the thing we're talking about is that
Oh man, you're
the
right.
what
The
is
S6 Edge in emerald green. Oh man.
yeah
I
that's
had to
that
look it up. I honestly didn't think there was a green phone. It's just like the one color. But yeah, um, I like
Well,
green.
I'm kind
I,
of sad.
you know,
Yeah, go ahead, Helena.
yeah, no, the going back to the Huawei Mate 20 Pro, I mean, they have a green, and I think they're calling it emerald, maybe, but it's beautiful. Like they've done a really good job with their green, and I think it's the most attractive choice from the different Mate 20 Pro options. So
mhm.
I think green might be the new rose gold next year. I don't know. We'll
Perhaps.
see.
Let's hope, because obviously it's just one slide of this Samsung Developer Conference presentation, but it suggested that One UI does actually take color scheming off of the device's physical color, and it was shown off with green and pink and whatnot. So, I mean, that's
I
always interesting to think about. But
no, no,
I've
I think it's
always,
great.
yeah, no, I've always mourned. Um, Moto Maker, because like we lost
Oh
Moto
man,
Maker, and it's
yeah.
just like I still want that freaking orange phone, the orange silicon, road backing, and like maybe like a few other citrus colors, and like that would have been my jam. I would have been happy with that. So
I
why
forgot.
isn't orange?
Yeah, no, I forgot.
Go
I
ahead.
forgot all about Moto Maker, and now that you
Yeah.
mention it, like that's actually really missed. That those
Mhm.
customization options, they were amazing. So maybe from now on every podcast, we should have like a something that's died that we we need to pay our respects to. That should just be a little bit of a like something that you throw on to every show. Just throwing it
So
out there.
the Nexus, the Moto Maker. Do you have anything that we want to pad out with? We got a couple more minutes. TK, what's one thing that has recently died that you want to say goodbye to?
Actually, I want to say probably the small form factor phone, not the palm size phone. I'm talking like the small 5-inch, 4-inch phone. The fact of the matter is, even with the smaller pixel, we're still getting above 5 inches, and there is still. And I'm not to trying to give it to Apple, but the last Apple, the SE is basically the end of a line of devices that we no longer have the ability of looking forward to, right? I mean, what we have now is the XR, and that's the smallest that they'll carry. And so if there's ever been a demand for a form factor that is still small but answers the same powerhouse requirements of the new phones, I feel like we're losing that war. A lot of our phones are opposite, just so big now that the small phone looks weird. So I wish that would come back. But we'll see.
We'll see. Palm phone unboxing, youtube.com/tkbay. Helena, as I hurriedly try to think of something that I might want to mourn, do you have any ideas?
Okay, so I definitely would need more time to think this one through, especially since the other ones we brought up were so strong. But I am going to mention something that I was recently thinking about, not exactly mobility related, but the connected scale, like when you for weighing yourself. I
Oh,
feel like that was really hot a couple of
Mm,
years ago, and now I don't know if anyone's doing it. And
I
it's kind of something that I would like to have again. So
it's
just
kind of
throwing it
under
out
the
there.
radar. Yeah. It's because Nokia just did away with its health division, and I'm not sure because Withings, the original company, it did go back to its original ownership, but I'm not sure if they're
Yeah.
still really as focused on that digital scale as much as anything else. So we'll have to see about that. I I don't know. For me, Perhaps it's Windows 10 Mobile. Like I've always wanted to try out a third OS and I've never really gotten to. I did own, what was it? It was one of the later phones that had the Snapdragon 212 on it, and I didn't really use it much, and ended up selling it off in like a couple of months without ever really looking into it. So yeah, that's but like the tiles, the Metro was pretty
Metro UI, yeah.
appealing to me. Metro UI. It's just there weren't really any apps. Sorry to say.
No.
But yeah.
We'll see iterations. I'm pretty sure we'll see some new things, and they'll bring some nostalgia back.
Yeah, foldable tiny computers, Microsoft. Maybe you could do that. Surface
The
phone.
Surface Mini.
Sure. Let's
The
bring that
Surface
back
Mini.
again.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that again, because that hasn't fruited anything in this world, in this timeline. In any case, I do want to thank you, Helena, for joining us this week. It's been a
Thank you for
pleasure.
having me.
First time on. Great
And not
stuff.
the last.
Not the last. Definitely so. But we'll
Yeah.
see you in Las Vegas. TK, thank you for being with us this week, too. It's been my pleasure hosting you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, and nice to see you again, Helena. It's been some time. We'll talk.
Thanks,
All y'all
guys.
will
Have a
talk.
great weekend, everyone.
See you later. And on that note, that is it for now. The weekly is just as much conversation as it is a show, so make sure you make your voices heard, either in the comment sections or by emailing us at podcast@pocketnow.com. On Twitter, TK is at TKDSL8655. Helena is at Helena Stone, and I can be found at Point Jewels. Pocket Now is at Pocket Now on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube in English and Espanol, where you can find more news on the Pocket Now Daily and Pocket Now a Diario every weekday. We certainly appreciate your feedback from Google, Apple, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, or wherever you happen to be streaming us, because without you, we wouldn't have been able to make this show for your eyes and ears for 331 weeks straight. Thanks for your company. It has been a pleasure. Let's meet again soon.